I've got an interesting product to take a look at today. It's an iPad stand, but with a difference, because this one has a built-in hub. Let's check it out. So this is the Qwiizlab US1011 Pro, just checking my notes there. And there is also a 1012 Pro for the larger 12.9-inch iPads. This 11-inch model supports the iPad Air 4th and 5th generation and the iPad Pro 11-inch generations 1 through 4. Basically, if it's got a Type-C port on your iPad, then it is supported. I don't know about the standard iPad. That does use the same chassis now as the iPad Air. It's possible that it'll fit on the stand, but I haven't got one to test. The magnets might be in a different place. Now this stand uses N52 magnets, if that means anything to you, but I can confirm they're plenty strong enough to hold your tablet nice and secure. I'm quite happy to test that because this is my wife's iPad, not mine. And it's easy to take the iPad off. And what you find behind is we've got this nice silicone pad. So when you put your iPad on, you're not going to scratch the back of it with this particular stand. Now, the construction of the stand itself is all aluminium or aluminum, depending on where in the world you are. It feels premium. It weighs about 1 kilo. And yeah, it's very nice. The hinge is really nice. Everything feels premium, secure and tight. Now the hinge has about 80 degrees of tilt and it can run through a whole 360 degrees. There's no stop point, you just keep rotating. Much like other stands I've reviewed, there's no detent though to get it absolutely straight, so you've just got to kind of line it up yourself to make sure you're straight. Of course, to make use of the hub features, you will have to connect a cable to the iPad, and there is one supplied, which has an L-shaped plug at one end. I'll probably use that on the iPad itself and then plug this end into the stand. Before I do that though, let's just run through the ports on the side and let you know what we've got. So if we take a look at the ports, it's all the usual stuff that you get on a USB hub. But starting at the top, we've got a USB Type-C port, and this is the one that you use to connect to your tablet. Next is a headphone jack, which will be welcome news to anybody who's missed the headphone jack since Apple removed it from all of the iPads. And then we have another Type-C port, and this is used for charging. Now on the spec sheet on the website, it says it supports power delivery and 60 watts. So I've tested this out, I've plugged in a charger and it does indeed charge the iPad. But I was curious to see if this port would also function as a standard USB port if we weren't using the charger. And the answer is sadly no, it doesn't. Underneath there we've got the usual SD card slots. So we've got a large SD card slot and a micro SD slot. These are UHS Type 1 slots, so it's limited to 100 megabytes per second. Next we have two Type A ports, which I'll come back to in a moment. And then at the bottom, an HDMI port, which supports 4K resolution at 60 Hz. Now, as you can see, we've got the iPad here connected up to a small portable display, but of course this is the A14 iPad, so it doesn't have Stage Manager or anything like that. We tried it with LumaFusion and DaVinci Resolve to see if we could get that external screen to work. Perhaps if you've got an A14 iPad, something like this is not that useful to you, unless you particularly want to use a keyboard and mouse and a much larger monitor, then I can see the point. But that's an iPadOS limitation rather than a limitation of the stand itself. And of course, if you're using an iPad Pro and you're using Stage Manager, then this could be an ideal part of your desk setup. So let's just come back to these USB ports. They're Type A, as you can see. There's two of them, and on the website it says that they are USB 3.0 spec, which equates to 3.2 generation 1, or in other words, 5 gigabits per second. But I just wanted to test how much impact these slightly slower ports will have in the real world. So I took a trusty Samsung T7 drive, and what we did was we plugged it into the iPad Air here, and we just did a Jazz Disk Bench test on it. And what we found is we got 314 megabytes per second on read and 277 megabytes per second on write. That's with the drive plugged directly into the iPad. Run the same test, plug in the drive into one of these ports instead, and we get 304 megabytes per second on read, so that's a drop of about 3%, and 265 megabytes per second on write, which is a drop of about 4.5%. So in the real world, if you're using an iPad Air with an A14 chip, not much difference in the use of these ports. We also need to test it with the M1 chip. I have an M1 iPad Pro, so I also plugged that in and did the same test. Now this drive, when it's plugged directly into that iPad with its USB 4 port incorporating Thunderbolt 3, we get 765 megabytes per second on read, just 232 megabytes per second on write. Now that does seem a lot lower than the read speed, and that is because there are issues with the implementation of USB on the M1 and M2 chips. We've reported on this plenty of times on the channel before. But as you can see, that faster port does indeed get you a faster read speed at 765. If we then go through the hub, the read speed drops down to 307. When it comes to writing though, we get 257 megabytes per second, which is actually an 11% increase when you use the hub. And you might be thinking, why on earth would that be true? But we've seen exactly the same behavior with the M1 Max as well, where you can get better performance on USB drives sometimes when you're plugged into a hub. Anyway, my conclusion is that these Type A ports are fast enough for use with an iPad, because iPads don't deliver massive USB performance anyway. The iPad goes onto the stand really easily. Go get the magnets in the right position. And this cable I think is really neat. I'm going to use the L side on here, coil it around and plug it into the back. That's a nice neat solution. Now you've got full rotation all the way around, and the cable's long enough to give you plenty of maneuverability there so that you can go from landscape to portrait. And of course you've got the angle adjustable as well. And as you can probably see, that does take a little bit of effort to adjust the tilt, which is probably what you want. You don't want it too loose, but you do need to be careful, of course, because the force required is enough to pull the iPad off of the magnet, and you don't want to drop your iPad. So just be cautious as you're doing that. Other than that, there's very little that I don't like about this stand. It makes perfect sense to me. If you're going out to buy a stand to put your iPad on to use with Stage Manager or something like that, why wouldn't you want a stand with a built-in hub? It's a great idea. Pricing wise, these are at the moment $110. I think there's a sale or a promotion going. We'll put some links in the description. If you want the larger one, that is also $110. And I think that's a reasonable price for the quality of the item. So yeah, I like this product. This gets a thumbs up from me, and I hope this video gets a thumbs up from you. Or a thumbs down if that's your thing. Either way, thanks in advance for your subs, your shares, your likes, your comments, everything you do to support the channel. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you again soon for some more geekery.